Turning now to the Republicans, we spoke with Florida Senator Marco Rubio in Sioux Center, Iowa earlier. We began by asking him about the prisoner swap.
Well, first, let me say they're not prisoners. These people that were being held were hostages. None of them had violated any real laws. And in fact, some of them weren't even charged. One of them was a reporter. The other one was a pastor. And they'd done nothing. And let me just say, Bob Levinson is still missing. The Iranians know where he is, or we believe they do. And they're not being cooperative about that. We should not forget Mr. Levinson and his situation. But going back to the point, these people were hostages. The people America's releasing, they were convicted in a court of law after due process of helping violate sanctions. The president has pardoned them in exchange for a release of hostages which had done nothing wrong. And it proves, once again, that now nations and enemies of America around the world know that there's a price for Americans. If you take an American hostage, Barack Obama will cut a deal with you, whether it's Bergdahl, what he did with the Castro brothers, and now what he's done with Iran.
What about
we're happy they're coming home, but they never should have been held prisoner in the first place.
What about the quick resolution of the 10 sailors earlier last week? John Kerry, Secretary of State, said that is another instance in which diplomacy helped solve that faster than it would have in the past.
Well, again, imagine if those sailors had wandered into Israeli waters or Egyptian waters. We never would have heard about it because there wouldn't have been a thing going on there, an incident. They would have had their motor repaired and sent back on their way. Instead of what happened, Iran grabbed them, put them on their knees, put their hands behind their head, forced them to apologize on video, made the female sailor wear a burqa, filmed them in captivity in that room, all in an effort to show how powerful they are and how weak we are in a huge propaganda score. This is not the act. They're not our allies. They're not our friends. And ultimately, they released them, but only after achieving what they wanted from it. And that is to prove that if they wanted to, they can grab American sailors and subject them to this treatment.
Let me ask you about propaganda. President Obama in his State of the Union said that with ISIS, when Republicans say it's too grave a threat, it plays right into their hands. You've said it's a clash of civilization. So are you playing into their hands as the president has charged?
Well, I think playing into their hands would be to ignore the reality of what ISIS has become. ISIS is not just some group of radicals on the back of pickup trucks. This is a group that's grown in both influence and sophistication. They have a very sophisticated propaganda program that are recruiting foreign fighters. They have a sophisticated understanding of foreign immigration practices. You've seen how they've been able to insert people into Europe using the refugee crisis. There's a group that controls significant territory in Iraq and in Syria. This is a serious threat. Can we defeat them? Absolutely. But only if we have a real war against them, which is to find them and destroy them. And if you capture any of them alive, send them to Guantanamo and find out everything they know.
You said this threat has changed the nature of the immigration debate. You said during the debate this week it is dramatically different than it was 24 months ago. But during the immigration debate in the Senate that you were very much a part of, there were two amendments, one that dealt with visa overstays because of possible terrorists using that visa overstays, and another one about securing the border first before any kind of a deal. You voted against both of those. Weren't people worried about security at the time and not just because of ISIS in terms of terrorist threat?
Well, let me correct you about those amendments because they had already been dealt with in other amendments. For example, John Cornyn had an amendment on the border, which I supported, actually. I also sponsored or was a co-sponsor of the largest border surge in American history, 20,000 new border agents, completing 700 miles of fencing. As part of that, there was a biometric entry-exit tracking system that is required to prevent visa overstays, so we could identify people that had overstayed, know where they were, and be able to remove them from the country. All of that was either dealt with or about to be dealt with in the amendments that I supported.
So the threat was not a new threat.
But as far as this well, it's a different threat. We clearly have in the past always had terrorist groups that have had an interest, but we've never had a group like ISIS that has an in-depth understanding of foreign immigration practices. For example, we know that one of the killers in San Bernardino entered the U.S. on a fiancé visa, something that most Americans didn't even know existed. And that process broke down. We didn't have the refugee crisis that we're now facing. We have always had terrorist groups, but even Al-Qaeda and some of the other groups that are out there are regionally based. They strike at America as they have in the past on different occasions, but their focus was primarily on the Middle East. This is a group that has global ambitions of conquering and flying the black flag of ISIS over the White House. So the ISIS situation is dramatically different from any other terrorist threat we've ever faced. It is the most active, sophisticated, well-funded terrorist group we have ever confronted, and they need to be defeated. Either they win or we win, and when I'm president, we're going to win this battle.
Let me ask you about becoming president, a political question. There are a lot of people who are nervous about Ted Cruz and who are nervous about Donald Trump and would like to coalesce around one candidate. But there are a lot of other candidates that you're competing with. Why not just make the argument and say, don't vote for anybody else because we'll split the vote, back me as an alternative to Ted Cruz and to Donald Trump?
Well, actually, I've been saying now for a while, I believe I'm the only one in the primary field that can unite the Republican Party, which is critical, but also attract new voters who haven't voted for us in the past. But I believe I am best positioned to take our principles of conservatism and convince people that haven't voted for us in a quarter century that we're a better choice than the other party. And I know this. Hillary Clinton does not want to run against me. Their attacks are constant from their campaign. I cannot wait to run against her. If I'm our nominee, we will defeat her, and we're going to turn this country around.
There's been a lot of people buying firearms recently, and you bought one on Christmas Eve. Why?
Well, first of all, I'm not home very often, and so those were one of the few days that I was there. Second, I have a right to protect my family, and that's why I was previously a firearm holder as well. This was an additional one. And again, I think many Americans around the country feel the same way. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I have a right to protect my family if someone were to come after us. In fact, if ISIS were to visit us or our communities at any moment, the last line of defense between ISIS and my family is the ability that I have to protect my family from them or from a criminal or anyone else that seeks to do us harm. Millions of Americans feel that way.
All right, Senator Marco Rubio, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.